Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Coach Denojo, and welcome back to the D&D Dojo. So, being that the holidays are here and it's time of giving gifts and joy and merriment and all that fun good stuff, some of you may have received D&D for Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating. And this can be in the form of dice, the books themselves, whatever the case may be. So some of you are probably getting into D&D for the first time, or maybe you're veterans who've been in this for a while and you've given the gift of D&D to someone else because you're trying to drag them into this hobby so they suffer with you. I get it. Trust me, I do it all the time. For those of you that are going to be start playing, maybe even running D&D games starting soon, I just have some words of advice for you guys, and some of these things are good for both new and old players. So stick around, and for you dungeon masters and players, I have a little bit of something for everybody. So starting with my dungeon masters, if you maybe have gotten this bad boy for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holiday you're celebrating, I got this as an early Christmas present. Yay! So maybe you got this book and you want to run your first D&D adventure. Fantastic. Before I get into the actual advice, I'm going to make a few assumptions. The first assumption is that you've read this book. If not specifically this book, at least some kind of rule book. Maybe you have the player's handbook, which isn't in this room with me, and you have an understanding of D&D. Okay, cool. We're making that assumption first. The next assumption is you have friends to play with. You have 3, 4, 5, hopefully not more than that, players who want to play D&D with you. Fantastic. You have dice, you have a place to play, you have snacks ready to go. Awesome. So what do you do now? Well, the first thing you want to do is determine the scope or the size of your adventure. Do you want to have a long-standing campaign that could last over a year? Or do you want to have something shorter? If you're new to running D&D or any TTRPG, I recommend starting small. Run a one-shot adventure or a short module or something like that before you decide to tackle a major campaign. Now, what is a module if you've never run D&D before? A module is an adventure that can take maybe 3 to 4 sessions, sometimes more, sometimes less, to complete. Think of these as a simple quest. You go into a town, the mayor's daughter's been kidnapped, you go to the dungeon of the evil necromancer who's going to sacrifice her to Vecna, and you save the day. Yay, congratulations. That took you 4 sessions and you guys leveled up, you got some cool loot and some gold, and now everybody thinks you're cool. That's a module. The reason that's a module is because you can slot that adventure, that concept, into pretty much almost any campaign. So a module is called such because it's modular. You can take these different adventures and mush them together into a campaign. A campaign, on the other hand, is a long storyline that is comprised of multiple modules. That took 7 tries. Anyway, so for example, I'm running Curse of Strahd with a group of friends. The modules that they've gone through so far is the Death House, the Village of Barovia, they're in the middle of the old Bone Grinder right now, and there's a lot more. Now, when determining the scope of your adventure, there's a couple things you need to consider as factors. The biggest thing is your experience as the Dungeon Master. If you're brand new, this is your first adventure, let me rephrase that. I don't recommend you start with a long-standing campaign. Now, you could. I did. It didn't end well. Well, we had fun, so I guess it technically ended well. But it was a lot of an undertaking for a first-time Dungeon Master. I would recommend you start small. But again, as someone who started off with a major campaign or a long campaign, it's a little hypocritical, I guess you could say. But I recommend start small. Get a little adventure that takes 3 to 4 sessions, or maybe even 1 session. Run that and see how you liked it. The other thing is you have to factor in how much time do you have to play with your friends. You may only have the opportunity to play once a month, and you have to consider that. If you're going to run a campaign like Curse of Strahd, I use that because I'm currently running it, like I said, it could take you a very long time to complete it. When I finished it the first time, we played once a week, and I cut out an entire chapter of the adventure. It's a long game. So just understand that if you're cool with that, cool, go for it. Or maybe you play like multiple times a week or have the opportunity to do so. Maybe you can do a campaign. It's your life, not mine. I, on the other hand, can only play like once a month, maybe twice if I'm lucky. So, you know, it's a little bit more difficult for me than it was when I was in college. The other thing you want to consider if you're going to be a dungeon master is how do you want to be a dungeon master? That's a weird question, and allow me to elaborate on that. Dungeon masters all have different styles in how they do things. Me, for example, I'm very rules light. If I think a rule is stupid, I'm not going to enforce it. Or if a player wants to do something that's against a rule, if I think it fits the narrative, I'm going to opt for that instead. Versus a couple of my other friends, who one of them is looking into being a dungeon master himself, he wants to understand every rule possible and kind of have each rule almost memorized, which good luck, you're smarter than me, that's for sure. So these are just two different DMing styles where I'm more narrative based. He's going to be more rules based. Of course, that's up to his narrative skills too. My point being is that when you're playing a game, you don't have to memorize this every rule, even as the dungeon master. Would it help? Sure. But for my style, I don't think I need to memorize it. If something comes up that I don't know, I'll just look it up. Now, that being said, I've been running D&D games for over a decade, so I have the experience to just improv that stuff. But as a new time DM, it's best, I think, to at least understand how combat and skill checks work and be ready to just tell a story, really. That's just my personal opinion. But you can also look up different ways to DM through YouTube videos and other resources online. So think of that before you run your games. How do I want to run this game? Do I want to tell the story? Do I want to just play kind of like a combat simulator? Both are valid ways to play D&D, and I'll go into another point soon that will determine really how you're going to know if your group is good for that. All right? So the last thing for the Dungeon Masters is this. It is not you versus the players. Now, veterans, hopefully you know this. If you don't, I'm so sorry. But new people may not know this, that in D&D, it's not 1 versus 6 people. The Dungeon Master is almost like a game dev, where the villain isn't me, it's the monsters I put onto the field. And it's my job to create a balanced encounter so you guys feel challenged, but also you can either face roll it or not face roll it. It really depends on your strategies. The point is that a dungeon master should not look to just slaughter the players. It's very simple. You snap your fingers and everybody's dead. Done. But a good dungeon master will make the encounters challenging, fun, and everyone's going to have a great time, including yourself. And remember, it's not just your story. It is everyone's story. You, of course, will have the backbone of the story ready, but your players are going to alter it. It is cooperative storytelling, as me and my friends call it. So it's not just a matter of you have this awesome novel that you want to have your friends experience. It's a novel you're all writing in that moment. So my dungeon masters, that's just a little bit of advice I have for you guys. If you want more D&D, specifically DM advice, ask for it in the comments below, and I will gladly make more videos on advice that I would give to dungeon masters. Now for my players, let's get into what you can do. The first thing let's talk about is something that's been bouncing on my head for the better part of probably half a year now, is this idea that your character is not your class. So what that means is that when you see a class, there's going to be some some pictures, and there's plenty of memes online of how bards just want to sleep with everybody, paladins are the fun police, and rogues steal everything that's not nailed down to the floor. Well, these are stereotypes that you can play into. They're a lot of fun to play into. I've done every barbarian I've played is the caveman talking brawny stupid guy, but you don't have to do that. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people think that, well, if I'm playing a rogue, that means I have connections to a criminal underground, right? No, that's called the criminal background. Your rogue class is your skill set as an adventurer. So to explain this better, let's look at an in-game example, and that is the swashbuckler archetype of the rogue. This is from 2014. It hasn't been translated into 2024 D&D yet, but what it did was, or what it does rather, is that it is a archetype of rogue that makes you a duelist. You can fight somebody one-on-one, and the best part is it still triggers your sneak attack, which as a rogue, that's your main source of damage. So now, for those that don't know, sneak attack usually requires an ally or to be hidden essentially, but a swashbuckler can charge up to somebody and attack them, and it would still trigger sneak attack once per turn. Now, what's the character like then? Well, you have a few options. If you still want to go the criminal route, you could play a pirate. Think about a pirate with their cutlass screaming at the top of their lungs, the big coat, the hat, and everything as they run up to somebody and slash away. A swashbuckler, you know? But another way you could play it is a fencer. Maybe you're a noble who's just really good at fencing. So you can play a rogue who is a swashbuckler, and your character isn't a criminal. They're actually part of high society. So you are still playing the character with the skill set of rogue, but your character themselves is not this criminal. That if you look at the rogue class in the player's handbook, you'll see very typical rogues. But you don't have to be that. You could be a fencer. And again, playing the stereotypes is still fun. You can do it. I'm just giving you other options in case you're a new player who maybe you want to play the rogue because sneak attack sounds great, but you don't want to be a stealthy, sneaky guy. Or maybe you're a veteran and you've played a million rogues and you need something fresh. So try it out. And if you want more examples of these classes, I'm actually working on a series called Your Character is Not Your Class, where I'll go through each class and basically break the mold of each way of how to break from the stereotype. If you're interested in that, why don't you comment down below what class you want to see, and maybe I'll prioritize that. The other thing that you as a player should do is always review your character sheet. So, especially if you're a new player to D&D, you may forget certain things about your class. Heck, as a veteran, I forget things about my class. And now that we have so much new stuff, I don't know what any of it does. So it's always important to review your character sheet so you know what your character does. You know, it's something that we often forget, whether you play once a week or several months apart. You may forget what your character does, and there's no shame in that. We all have lives and we all have things to take care of, so it's fine. But the important thing is that when you know you're going to play D&D, it's important to review what your character does, what their abilities are, what their equipment is, what's in their inventory, if they have any spells. That way, when it comes up in game, you're not caught with your pants down and you could just go right into it. Like a good example of when I was running a game where a player forgot that they had a skill, it was about a turn later where someone turned around and they said, oh, wait, I actually, because of my heritage, I get a +3 to the save, so I actually should have passed. I'm like, well, that was a turn ago, so unfortunately, you're under its effect. You don't want to be in that situation where you could have been a mind control effect that you could avoid, but if you don't remember these things, then that's on you. Now, some people may sit there and go, well, doesn't the DM need to know what my character does? And the answer to that is yes and no. The Dungeon Master is responsible for a lot of things, and the amount of bandwidth, mental bandwidth is going on all cylinders when they're running a game. They have to remember the story, they have to remember the NPCs that they just made up on the spot, the combat encounters, the non-combat encounters, any stats for anything that's on the board that's not you guys. So the less you give your DM to memorize and work on, the better and easier the game will flow itself. So as players, make sure to just review your character sheet. And if you don't understand something, always ask your dungeon master and maybe they'll help well, not maybe, they will clear it up. And the last thing for the players is that always communicate with your dungeon master and remember that they are there for you. So just like I told the dungeon masters, it's not the dungeon master versus the players. Just like the players don't need to really sneak and scheme to one-up the dungeon masters. First of all, they're the god of the world. If you try to one-up them, they're gonna just dunk all over you. All right? But communicate with your dungeon masters. A good dungeon master works with their players. If my player turns around and tells me, hey, Joe, I want to do this, but my character class can't do this. What can we do about that? So then I turn around and go, well, how about we try it like this? Or maybe I'll offer them a different class option. Stuff like that. It's all about communication. And communicate with your dungeon master as well as your other players. If you do want to play in a way where it's you versus your dungeon master, you can absolutely do it like that, where you talk to your other players and they'll help you out for sure. But always remember that the dungeon master is not your enemy. They're your friend too, and kind of a player too. Technically speaking, yeah, they are. They just have a different role than you do. So always remember, feel free. Talk to whoever you need to. Don't feel like you always have to go to Reddit or YouTube to find the best resources. You've got your dungeon master, unless they can't answer your question. Then, in which case, then yes, go to Reddit or YouTube. I prefer YouTube, or just Google whatever it is you need to. All right. And my last piece of advice for everybody as you are about to go celebrate your holidays and be with family and friends, or if this video posts after the holidays, I hope you had a great holiday with your family and your friends, and you got some cool dice. You got the books that I just showed you guys. You got dice trays that you don't actually need, but they look really cool, so you got one anyway. So what do you do now? Let's just pretend, and again, more assumptions. You've got your dungeon master. You've got your friends that want to be players. What is the next step? And that is Session 0. I could make an entire video, and many people on YouTube have done this. Session 0s are the roots of every D&D game that work out well. Any game I've had that had a Session 0 always wound up being fantastic. That's not to say that a game without a Session 0 will always fail, but they're more prone to. So, really quickly, what is a Session 0? Session 0 is when you come to the table, no character, no nothing. You can have it in your head, but nothing on paper, okay? This is where the dungeon master pitches what their game is going to be. So let's pretend this is Session 0. Hi, I'm Kojo, your dungeon master for the day. This is my game. So here's what I'm thinking. It's a game set in a dark fantasy world where, you got werewolves, vampires, ghosts all over the place. Let's just pretend it's Barovia, or if you want to insert video games, it's like Druskin something from World of Warcraft, Battle for Azeroth, Druskar, Druskin Vault, whatever. So we're talking dark fantasy like Innistrad from Magic the Gathering, if you play that, stuff like that, where it's very Halloween-y and stuff like that. I know, we're in Christmas, just deal with me. Anyway, so that's the setting, and you are just simple adventurers in a town I haven't named yet, and the adventure starts off that the mayor of the town, his daughter has gone missing. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's in my head. Anyway, and the mayor asks you guys for help finding his daughter. According to eyewitnesses, they said they last saw her going into the woods, where you guys know that the rumors say it's haunted. So, you pitch that story to your players, okay? This is the part where the players turn around and say, that sounds great, or no, we don't like that. And don't take it to heart if they don't like certain things or the whole thing. It's kind of like when somebody wants to play a video game or read a book or watch a movie, they're going to want to know what it's about before they jump right into it. So, if you're pitching this to players, you want to make sure you give them just a quick synopsis of what your adventure is about. Don't tell them the details. Don't tell them that the mayor's daughter is off to go join a witch's coven or whatever. Spoiler alert. That's actually probably what I'll do. Anyway, but the idea is that you want to just give them a synopsis of what the adventure entails, not every little detail. All right? Okay, now let's say your players are hooked. They says, that sounds good. I can play a character that's like Van Helsing. I can play a character that's like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, da-da-da-da-da. But then one player pipes up and goes, hey, I don't really like the idea that's the mayor's daughter. Sounds a little too close to politics and, stuff like that. Can we make it, I don't know, the baker's daughter or the blacksmith's daughter, or maybe what's their son or something? And you, as a dungeon master, like, I'll tell you what you're supposed to say. You say, sure. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whose child that is. At the end of the day, you want your friends to go into that haunted woods, fight your monster, and be heroes at the end of the day. Or villains, really depends on your adventure. But little details like that are largely irrelevant. Again, depends on your story. But don't be afraid to change details like that. And even if it's more like bigger stories, like saying maybe they don't want to go into the woods, maybe they want to go into the next town over and get help from the local monster hunting guild or something like that. That could be an adventure too. It really is up to your players and you to discuss what it is. It's a back and forth. Your players may turn around and say, hey, we just don't like this part of the adventure. But you have, as a dungeon master, can turn around and say, well, that's just how it is. That's how I want to run it. But if the players really don't like it, they have the right to say, well, we don't want to play that then. Always be understanding that this is a back and forth between both you as the dungeon master and the players as well. you guys come to the agreement as to what kind of game are you guys playing. So that way nobody signs up for a game that they don't want to play. Now, the next thing is this is the part where the players, once you guys agree on the story and what kind of game you're playing, you want to determine what characters you're bringing to the table. Now, this is, in my opinion, the most important part because this is something that can happen across the board. In fact, most RPG horror stories stem from the idea that you really should have a session zero because you don't know what some of these people are bringing to the table. You might have some psychopath with some anger issues that wants to just murder his whole adventuring party because of, I don't know, some repressed anger issues, like I said. And this is the part where you want to draw that out. Well, not draw out anger issues. I'm just saying you say, hey, what are you playing? I'm going to play a barbarian. Okay, cool. Barbarians are great. So what's his story? He hates civilization. Okay, why is he living in a town? Because he wants to kill everyone. All right, maybe bring a different character. So anyway, maybe bring a different character. The point being is that you want a character that jives with the rest of the party. Again, I could go into full details on just session zeros alone, but the long and short of it is that you want 4 characters that will mesh together and work together. The way that I describe a D&D party is like the Avengers. You have amazing characters of Captain America, you have Iron Man, Thor, you have Bruce Banner, the Hulk, Hawkeye, Black Widow. The list goes on and on and on. And they are all amazing characters with their own stories, goals, and everything. But they all come together to do one thing. And that is essentially what D&D is like. Your characters are all amazing. The session zero, rather, is a great way to really find ways to make your characters shine. You can ask the DM to say, hey, if the baker's daughter is the one that's go missing, is it possible my character could be best friends with her? Or maybe I'm friends with the baker himself and he asks me specifically, go, this is how you tie in your character with the story and makes it more involved, you more involved with the story. It makes it a lot more fun in my opinion too. So this is where your characters need to work together, and it doesn't even have to be in the sense of like a typical RPG of like who's playing the tank, who's playing the healer, who's playing the damage dealer. Just honestly, personalities, really. That's the more important part because you're going to be role playing these characters and you're going to have to make decisions with these characters in mind. All right. So I'm going to wrap things up with one final thing for both the players and the dungeon masters, and that is, what if you don't have a group to play with? What do you do? Well, unfortunately, that is a very real thing that a lot of people go through, that people want to play D&D or run D&D games, but they have no one to play with. So what do? You could try to strong arm your family and friends into it, but if they're not interested, it's not going to be an authentic D&D experience. If I try to get my dad to play D&D, he'll fall asleep halfway through me explaining the first opening scene. Just like I have certain friends that I know would not mesh well with D&D, but there are resources to look into in case you can't find people within your local area to play D&D. A most common one, and that is Roll20. Roll20 is a free virtual tabletop that also has ways for people to find games. And Roll20 is just one of many virtual tabletops that offers ways to find games. I think most virtual tabletops have forums for you to find games to play. It's just Roll20 is the one that I'm the most, use the most often. So I know what they've got. It's also how my brother-in-law found a group that he was playing with for a very long time, and I think still does. So there are resources online to find groups, and that could be how you play. Playing online has skyrocketed in popularity, and you can even watch people play online. I watch Legends of Evantris occasionally, Dimension 20, and the critically acclaimed Critical Role. And that about wraps up my tips for you new people who just got the books, or maybe a new set of dice, or a cool little mini that you've always wanted. Maybe you're just finally getting into D&D, or maybe you're a veteran who just got the new books and you're ready to try out the new rules and everything. Either way, I hope you have the best of times. And if there is anything you want me to touch upon more in more detail, please comment below and I will gladly make videos about whatever you guys want me to, especially session zero, since they're so important. I can't stress enough, always have a session zero. All right, if you can help it, have a session zero. All right, everybody. Oh, one final thing, speaking of watching people play, after I post this video, I will be procrastinating editing a let's play of me and my friends playing through a small adventure I made in a setting called the Yokai Realms. If you're a fan of D&D Shorts and Loot Tavern, they worked together to create a third-party supplement for 5th edition D&D that is Fantasy Japan, and it is called Ryoko's Guide to the Yokai Realms. They're not sponsors, but I really like their stuff, and I'm a gigantic weeb, so of course I was all over this stuff. My friends and I have recorded a session, well, 2 sessions, of me and my 4 friends going through an adventure that one day I'll post on here, probably after New Year's, probably in January. I'm shooting for January for us to post those 2 episodes so you can see what kind of shenanigans I get up to as a dungeon master and my friends get up to as players. And that wraps up for today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all had great holiday seasons, have had whenever I post this video. Anyway, remember, go out there, have some fun, and go make some great stories.